Hey guys, welcome! Welcome to another episode of Felicia Figuring Out Knitting Machines. Hey guys, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Felicia from SweetGeorgia, and this is Taking Back Friday. This is a moment in time on Fridays where we sit down and we get together and we talk about stuff to do with the fiber arts. Everything from knitting to spinning to weaving to dyeing. This week, I'm going to talk about knitting with knitting machines because I've been doing quite a lot of knitting with the knitting machines in preparation for Knit City. So Knit City, if you haven't previously heard, is the big yarn festival that happens in Vancouver every year, happens around September, October. And this year is going to be amazing because we're going to have our big booth, we're going to have lounge, we're just going to have tons of little events going on throughout the weekend. So if you happen to be at Knit City, come by and say hello. I will be hanging out in the lounge, which is going to be across from our SweetGeorgia booth there. We are going to be debuting our brand new collection of colors that's going to be coming out this fall. And I am making sweaters for this event. I may end up with one sweater. We'll see. One sweater, one shawl. In any case, I've been working on samples to show some of the new colors that we've been making for SweetGeorgia. Now, as you can see here, I am wearing this sweater. This is called the Navelli. This is a Navelli Tee that was designed by Caitlin Hunter, and I knit this sweater a couple of years ago, actually. I love this sweater. When I finished making it, I did make videos about it on the channel, and I talked a lot about how I would knit this sweater again. I really quite enjoyed it. So you can see here, that is the pattern for the Navelli. You can see down here there is a nice color work section of the sweater. I really love this part of the sweater. The design for this color work is really great. And so, as you guys know, I have been switching a lot from hand knitting to machine knitting, trying to convert a lot of the patterns that I like from hand knitting patterns into machine knitting instructions. And what I really wanted to do was I wanted to knit that Fair Isle component or that color work component using the knitting machine, because that is what it's good at. So this one that I have in front of me, this is a Silver Reed SK280, and it should just function for Fair Isle using a punch card. I cleaned the machine, I cleaned out the arm, I cleaned out the carriage, I cleaned all the things. I went out and I bought myself a punch for making my own punch cards. So you can see that's what the punch looks like for making punch cards. I ordered myself a bunch of blank punch cards, and so these come with kind of like a tiny little dot in them to sort of center your hole punch. So when the hole punch comes out, it has like a little bit of a pin. It's almost the size of a mechanical pencil lead. So you figure out where you need to punch by using that little pin and setting it up on the hole that you need, and then you punch all the way and it will make a hole for your punch card knitting machine. However, I have spent hours trying to get the Fair Isle to work on this particular machine. It's killing me. It's absolutely killing me. I can get the punch cards to work for tuck, I can get it to work for lace stitches, I can get it to work for all sorts of things. I cannot get it to work for color work. So that was a struggle for me. So because we couldn't get the color work to work on this particular knitting machine, I decided to tag team on knitting the sweater, knitting the Navelli, with Greta at the studio. So Greta, she's the education program coordinator for the School of SweetGeorgia. She helped me knit the entire color work part of the sweater. So you can see this is the bottom of the sweater. This is the bottom of the Navelli that we are knitting. And so she knit the color work for this, and then she passed it to me. It was blocked. I measured the gauge on this, and she had left it on a cord. So she had left all of the live stitches on this cord. This looks like a knitting needle, but it's actually not. It's just a lot of this plastic cord, this plastic tubing that looks a little bit like a licorice candy, but it's a tube. And it just so happens that the opening of the tube fits the connection perfectly for the Chiagu interchangeable needles. This is crazy, but it totally works. And so you just take the tip of your Chiagu and you stick it into this plastic tubing, and then she used this as a spare needle. Of course, you can just use a spare knitting needle. So what I did was take all of the live stitches off of that cord and basically hang those stitches on the knitting machine. And then using those stitches, I increased a little bit because I knew I was going to seam up the two sides using mattress stitch. But from there, I basically just zipped off the stockinette portion of the sweater. So I'm going to show you the whole thing so far. So you can see here, these are the two Navellis together, the one that I'm wearing and the one that we're making. So the one that we're making here, this color work is all done, and then I zipped up the stockinette portion on the knitting machine. They are separated into front and back pieces, and then I have taken off all of the live stitches off of the knitting machine and then put them on spare knitting needles here. So the idea is that basically I have knit up until this part on the knitting machine. So this is all ribbing, one by one ribbing. Now, I know that my machine has a ribber and I could theoretically have switched it to ribbing, but I was too scared. I was scared I was going to drop stitches. I was scared of doing short rows and ribbing. I was scared of not being able to make it those 2 inches without messing something up, maybe not getting the right tension, just like lots of variables that I was uncertain of. And so that's why I decided to just take off the live stitches and I'm going to hand knit the one by one ribbing section by myself. And so this is kind of the point where I feel like I'm at with a lot of the knitting projects that I've been working with, is getting to the point of knitting a lot of squares. Like even this Navelli is basically, you know, this is a square. I've just basically knit stockinette in a rectangle. And I feel like that's where I am in a lot of spots in terms of the machine knitting. I can cast on, I can increase, I can decrease, I can make stockinette, I can make tuck stitches really, I can make ribbing on its own. I don't feel like I have the glue yet or the comfort level yet to be able to smoothly and easily move from one phase of the knitting pattern to another phase. These are all things that feel like when you're hand knitting, you can just pause and kind of look at what you're doing. You can go forward and back. You can make changes as you need to. You can kind of adjust your techniques. You can try it over and over again. You can knit a little bit and then rip and then try again. I feel like it would be more difficult to unpick machine knitting in order to fix mistakes and things like that. Okay, however, I will tell you about an experience that I had just today. And that is that, as you can see here, we are working with hand-dyed knitting yarn. Hand-dyed knitting yarn, we try to make it as consistent as possible when we dye it so that, you know, batch to batch, things match as close as possible. But even so, you are going to get variety and variation between skeins, even sometimes within the same skein. And so one of the things that we always encourage people to do when you knit with hand-dyed yarn is to alternate skeins. Ideally, alternate with 3 skeins, or at the very least alternate with 2 skeins. So this has been one of the things that's been holding me back from making more projects on the knitting machines, is because initially you are zipping back and forth with one color. If you want to change colors, you have to kind of manually unthread the carriage here and then leave one yarn to the side and then thread the next color and then zip a little bit and then switch colors again by taking the yarn out. All of that kind of stuff was really off-putting. I didn't want to do it. And then I discovered that there's this amazing thing called a color changer. And so the color changer is a little piece that you can add on to certain machines. So in this case, this is the SK280 from Silver Reed. There is a color changer called the YC, well, the one that I got is called the YC6 color changer. And so that allows you to change between 4 different colors of yarn or 4 different skeins of yarn, 4 different skeins of the same color yarn if you want to, which is exactly what I'm doing. So I am alternating between 2 balls of the same color yarn in order to get the best blending between the 2 skeins as possible. Now, before doing this on the actual Navelli sweater, Greta and I talked a lot about this and we had to I have to practice. I had to practice to make sure that I wasn't going to accidentally screw things up with a color changer and then have the entire sweater fall on the floor, all of these kinds of things. So You can see here, this is my practice swatch for using the color changer. So you can see I have a dark color and I have a light color. The dark color is called Marine. This is left over from a sweater that I knit a year ago. And then the lighter color is Glacier. And so the two colors I just happen to have left over in my stash here, so I'm using them for practice. So the way that the color changer works, in this case using these two colors, is that you zip across with one color and then you zip back. And so when you make it all the way to the left side of the machine and you trip this sort of driving lever, that causes the color changer to switch yarns, and it will automatically pull the yarn out of the carriage that you're working with and then automatically insert the next color that you're going to be working with. So if I zip back and forth, I zip back and forth with the Marine, so to the right, to the left with Marine, the color changer automatically switches the two colors and then puts the Glacier into the carriage, and then I zip across, zip back, and then when it trips that driving lever again, switches the colors again. It is magical. It's absolutely amazing. And I do not think that I would want to knit a sweater without this mechanism. It's amazing. So this is the swatch that was made with the color changer, two colors. I use this also because it's Tough Love Sock to measure the gauge, to make sure that I was getting a good gauge that would match Greta's color work. Because one of the things about this SK280 is that I feel like in order to get this kind of fabric, this kind of sloopy, nice, drapey fabric that we very often use for fingering weight yarn in hand knitted sweaters, I need to set up my machine at the absolute loosest tension possible. And I think part of that is because I'm sort of pushing at the very edge of what this machine wants to do with this yarn. Theoretically, you can knit all of this fingering weight yarn at a much firmer gauge, so you'd get a much firmer, much stiffer fabric, and that seems to work really well. The other thing about these standard gauge machines is it seems to also want a finer yarn, so almost like a lace weight yarn would do really, really nicely in a machine like this. And so using fingering weight on a standard gauge machine is kind of like, you can do it and I'm getting the fabric that I want, but I wouldn't be able to get anything looser than this because this is already set on the loosest tension possible. If I wanted to make a fabric that was looser than this fabric with fingering weight, then I'd have to step up to the mid-gauge machine. But the mid-gauge machine does not have a color changer. So you see the situation that we are in right now. Now, one of the amazing things about having this color changer is that you can use it in combination with punch cards. So theoretically, we should be able to make a punch stitch pattern where you knit like 4 or 8 rows of one particular color, and then you go click, click with the YC6, and then you switch colors and then knit another 6 or 8 rows of another color and then switch. And all of this makes the color patterning so much easier. It just automatically produces all of these multicolored patterns. It also theoretically should work with color work as well. So you could have one ground pattern, say we use the Marine color for the background, and then we had a motif that could change colors between 3 other colors or 4 other colors. So there could be like color A against ground, and color B against ground, color C against ground, color D against ground. So many things become possible with this idea. Now, previously, my Fair Isle was not working with the regular arm that goes with this carriage. And so now this arm that's on the carriage right now, this is the arm that goes with the color changer. So I have yet to try and get the color work to work with this arrangement. All of these things require time and practice and just intentional moments of learning. The thing that's really helped me is being able to dedicate a chunk of time to sit here and figure it out, because it is just like beginning knitting. You are making mistakes, you're dropping stitches, things are falling off. You need to stop, unravel what you're doing, and start over, and start over, and start over many, many times. And every time you do it, you're getting more familiar with how all of this works. You get familiar with how much pressure you need, making sure that everything is screwed in, aligned correctly, all of these things. It just develops more and more of that muscle memory, but you need to spend the time with it in order to get better at it. So here is where I am at with the Navelli. I will finish knitting all of that ribbing, and then there is a 3-needle bind off that happens at the top of the shoulder where it connects the front and the back pieces. So once those two pieces are connected, then I need to pick up stitches around here in order to make the sleeve. So then the question is if I should actually pick up using the machine or if I just knit the rest of the sleeve by hand. The sleeve is only about 2 inches or so. It's like 1.5 inches of color and then 1.5 inches of contrast color on the inside, and then it gets folded inside and then sewn together. So it would be easy. I mean, stockinette, it's a rectangle. I just have to do that. So we're almost there. We're almost finished. I'll be really, really excited to be able to show you what this sweater looks like finished. Maybe it's going to be on a dress form. Maybe I will wear it. I don't know, but we got to get this ready. Now, one more thing that I discovered while I was knitting with this color changer is that at one point in time, somehow both strands of yarn entered the carriage at the same time, and then they both knit together. And I could feel that something was happening with the tension that was on the yarn, because it just required much more force to sort of move the carriage across. And so when I figured that out, that it felt different than all the other rows, then I realized that something had gone wrong. And so then that's when I noticed that 2 of the strands were both in the carriage at the same time. So it was trying to knit 2 strands of yarn in. And what I had to learn how to do is unpick stitch by stitch. I had to unpick my knitting. And so all I did was I took the arm, I unscrewed it, wiggled it all out, and then released this. There's a latch here on the top of the carriage, and that sort of releases the carriage from doing anything, trying to attempt to make any stitches or anything like that. It just releases everything. And then I had to look at the stitches that were left on the bed and then reset the ones that had not yet been knit, and the ones that had been knit with this double strand, I had to gradually unpick my work and then go back to the beginning. So I feel like I have learned a new skill today, which is basically to unpick your knitting on a knitting machine. Not a great thing to have to learn, but it happens. It happens with hand knitting, it happens with machine knitting. So in any case, that is what I have to talk about today. I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear if you use a knitting machine, if you knit half of your project by hand and then half of your project by machine. We are in this case knitting something from the bottom up because it's really nice and easy, but I have also seen people knit yokes, knitting the yoke from the top, from the neckline down, and then hanging the rest of their sweater and then just zipping down the remainder of their sweater there. So lots of different options, knitting sleeves separately, sewing them on. I feel like there's a lot of possibilities, but right now a lot of my focus is taking these hand knit patterns that I have loved and somehow translating them in a way where I can knit them, at least in part, by machine, because it's fun. So thank you guys so much for being here. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. I would love to see you at Knit City if you happen to be in Vancouver in a couple of weeks. And if I don't see you there, I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, bye for now.